Hi, and welcome to Z Games. Recorded live at 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane and broadcast nationally over the Community Radio Network, Z Games brings you the latest gaming news, reviews and interviews from across Australia and around the world.
Welcome, listeners, to another exciting episode of your favourite radio show, Z Games. We are coming to you at some point in time, possibly even live, straight out of the 4ZZZ Studios. Joining me in the recording booth right now, Ms. Candy Payne.
Hi, everybody.
A triumphant return.
I know. I feel like every time I come in, I need a round of applause because it's so long in between now. Oh yeah, fairy claps.
Don't give her that.
Yeah, everybody, give me that. Welcome. Hi, everybody.
Mr. Jody McGregor.
Hi, everyone.
Yay! Well, look, I'm happy that you're here again.
I'm glad someone is.
Yeah. Mostly off mic tonight, our glorious leader, Razor.
Hey.
He's deathly ill, listeners, so don't lick your radio.
I'm not going to talk much.
No. And I am Lee, and this is a show about video games. Jody?
Yes, it is. At the start of the show, we heard Regurgitator with a song called Fantasyland. I like it because it's about unicorns.
Yeah.
It's like their nicest song.
It was very pleasant.
Glad you liked it. Candy, do you have the week's news headlines for us?
Of course I do.
What are we talking about this week, though, Jody?
Oh, all right. This week on the show, we will be talking about The Wolf Among Us, which you and I and Ray have been playing. We've been detecting it up in Fabletown.
Detecting it. What did
That's
you
how it
say?
works.
Detectiving
it.
Yeah.
It's a verb.
It's not even a word, let alone a verb. Yeah, okay.
And you've been playing Divinity Original Sin?
That is correct, yes.
And you've been playing it co-op with your girlfriend?
Yes, that's
so
right.
That will be hilarious.
So what's the verb in that
sure.
one? Divinitying it up?
Yes.
Yes.
Good one.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
learning.
I think actually
English lesson.
sinning it up.
Or sinning it up.
Yeah.
Well, that's a real word.
Yes.
Nice one.
Candy, the news.
The news, I'll take it away. 2014 Game On Symposium is happening at QT Creative Industries Precinct from August 9th to 10th. Now in its third year, the GO423 Symposium returns with 2 days of industry guest speakers, panel discussions, workshops, an open mic session, and most importantly, the opportunity to test and play new games. Routes is the theme of this year's symposium, reflecting the local game-making community's journey and the many stories they have to tell. I'm looking
Sweet.
forward to it this year.
Yeah. It's
Lots to get involved with. So if you jump onto the site, QT Precinct site or the Game On Symposium website, there's lots to learn about. We can put some details up for everyone.
yes, it's a great show. Everyone should go along to that. We'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll be there.
And a bunch of local developers showing off their games and talking about stuff.
Yeah.
General speaker discussions, yeah. EA has announced a new subscription service available only on Xbox One that will allow users to trial games ahead of launch, receive discounted prices on digitally bought games, as well as access a stable of games for the duration of their membership. Called EA Access, the service bears some similarity to the PlayStation Plus and the Xbox Games with Gold subscription services and will cost $6.99 Aussie dollars a month or $39.99 for a full year. The service will allow access to the Vault, a selection of games that will initially include Battlefield 4, FIFA 14, Madden 25 and Peggle 2, with more to follow. No launch date for the service has been given, but EA said that it would begin soon.
It's an interesting service for them to launch that. I guess in many ways it's kind of reflecting what they're doing with Origin on the PC, in that they're making part of their backlog available for people who take advantage of it. But it's going to be fascinating to see how that compares to PlayStation Plus and Xbox Gold as well.
Well, and just quickly off air, we were just having a very brief discussion. Does this mean that EA games will not be those kind of little exclusive sneak peeks anymore on the Gold service and on PlayStation networks?
Yeah.
Is that going to narrow it down to just their access?
We've seen on PC that their new games were pulled off Steam and were only available on Origin. So if you wanted Battlefield 3 or Mass Effect 3, you had to install it. So is that going to happen here?
Interesting. We'll follow up, we'll find out and let everyone know. Sony USA has agreed to settle a class action lawsuit filed against them by users affected by the PlayStation Network breach of 2011. The proposed settlement, which is yet to be approved by a judge, would see Sony dish out $15 million worth of free digital games. Unfortunately, the free games will only be available to residents of the USA. The PSN breach of 2011 was a result of hackers breaching Sony's database, compromising the personal information of 80 million users and causing the service to be down for nearly a month. That was huge. I love that it's still referred to as like the breach of 2011. It's so dramatic.
Nothing else happened that year.
No, just the breach of 2011.
Yeah.
And lastly, a burglar who robbed an apartment at gunpoint in Eastbourne, UK, has been brought to justice after the robbery was heard over Xbox Live voice chat. The residents were playing Call of Duty Black Ops 2 when they were interrupted by two gun-wielding bandits who tied them up and demanded drugs and money. The audio of the crime was heard by a friend who quickly alerted the authorities. Reportedly, one of the burglars received a phone call from his probation officer to discuss a missed appointment. 19-year-old Jay Giorgio was arrested 2 hours after the incident and has been sentenced to 8 years jail. His accomplice still remains at large.
Amazing.
So
Oh my god.
The guy received a phone call from his probation officer while he was in the middle of committing a
At
burglary.
gunpoint.
And it was recorded
Oh my
on
lord.
somebody's Xbox. That's incredible.
Gaming saving the day.
Yeah.
Once again.
Yeah.
Thanks, Black Ops. Call of Duty. Who'd have thought you'd prevent gun crime?
So true.
Let's
Oh
cut to
my
a song
God.
now while we continue to chortle loudly off air.
All right, thank
yeah.
you for the news, Candy.
No worries, team.
Now let's hear something by Aussie hip-hop group True Vibe Nation. This is called Attack of the Robots. Now, gang, Lee, Ray, and I have all been playing The Wolf Among Us, which is Telltale's new episodic game, following on from their Walking Dead game, which we all loved
So
quite a lot.
loved.
How are we feeling about The Wolf Among Us? Have we all finished it?
Yeah.
All 5 episodes? All blown away by the ending? Not to spoil anything about it, but...
Yeah, listeners, I have been reassured that this is not going to have spoilers because I'm yet to play it and I just don't want it ruined for me personally.
No.
So
Yeah.
no panic out there.
But
Don't
that,
ruin it.
that bit where he goes to space and fights...
shut up, man.
Nazis
Yeah.
on the moon?
Yeah, and then
Man.
what about the demon angel? Like, what a weird combination.
Funny.
Yeah.
All right.
Back to your review.
Actual true things about The Wolf Among Us. It's a film noir kind of story, which is very different from the zombie story we encountered in The Walking Dead. A film noir story set in New York in the 1980s, only all of the characters in it are refugees from fairy tales and myths and legends and children's stories who have escaped to New York and taken up new identities and hidden themselves. And you, the detective, Bigby Wolf, formerly the
Love
Big
it.
Bad Wolf,
Oh, love it.
of course.
Yeah. So you kind of get to shape this character. You get to determine what kind of sheriff he's going to be. And in the first episode, you're very reactive. And what I liked was the way that through the course of the series, you get to reflect on your actions over and over and over again until you have constructed your own version of what this character should be and how he should police and serve the people of Fabletown.
Yeah, that's a real recurring theme. It has that sort of redemption arc, which is very true to what film noir movies are about.
Yeah.
The idea that the main character has done bad stuff in the past and is trying to atone for that by fixing things in the present, but it never works out right, and he always winds up having to make really hard choices, and maybe he does the wrong thing again. It's just that the bad things he's done in the past are blow down houses and eat Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah, so it's based on a comic series by Bill Willingham, which came out I think now 10 years ago.
Yeah, 2002 it started up.
Yeah, to a fair amount of acclaim. I can't stand the comics, and I love this video game. So well done them for finding the good idea at the core of something that a lot of people really enjoy, and I think that they will enjoy this as much as anyone could. but if you are repulsed by them, there's also a really great game with a lot of great characters and a fantastic story here to discover.
Yeah, as someone who thought the comics were okay and then got bored of them around issue 30, I think this is a much better story and a much better introduction to the characters as well.
Yeah.
It's a prequel to the comics, sort of, but it doesn't require that you've read the comics at all and works extremely well on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the comic series is called Fables, which you can't call a game Fables because of that other Fable series that people have probably heard of and played, but you can call a game The Wolf Among Us, and that's totes fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the fairy tale aspect of it, which clashes a lot with the film noir detective story that it's telling, actually makes for a really interesting tension.
Yeah.
You're investigating crimes that are quite brutal, and you're talking to suspects, you're interrogating them. You have the option to be quite rough with them depending on how you want to play Bigby. But these suspects and these victims are like Mr. Toad of Toad Hall.
Yeah.
And Colin the pig from the Three Little Pigs,
Yep.
who's still annoyed about that house of his. Your assistant is like this gal Friday, who, Snow White, who is also your boss. The deputy mayor of Fabletown is Ichabod Crane from the Sleepy Hollow. So there's all of these characters. A lot of them you'll be familiar with, but a few that are actually quite obscure,
Yeah.
from stories you won't have heard of.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting having them like as these down and out characters trying to get by in crummy apartments in New York City, and you show up and mess up their lives.
One thing that I always found the metaphor that they were working in the comic was a bit on the nose, but here it's actually they tweak it slightly so that you've got the characters who are from stories about that the version that we get now is about beautiful people who end up affluent and powerful and wealthy, and then there are these other characters who are just they're the trolls and the monsters, and their life is kind of rubbish, and they're the outcasts, they're the people on the fringe of society, and you as Bigby Wolf, as the sheriff here, you work for the winners of the fairy tales, but at the same time you are a monster as well, and you have to find your place there. And I found that my sympathies were constantly shifting, and I think like it was so successful at making me think about the way that the people view authority depending on how they feel it serves them. That I was quite impressed and deeply moved.
Yeah, a lot of what you're doing is just talking to people.
Yeah.
There's some really well-written dialogue, these great conversations, and it's just sort of you take your turn picking from 3 or 4 dialogue options or make a decision about how to treat a person while you're interviewing them. And that's at least half the game, if not more, is just really well-written conversations where you decide what kind of a character you are and how you want to pursue your job of keeping the law, of keeping these fables from murdering each other or from revealing themselves to the public.
Yeah.
And that is really interesting. Like, how much of an authoritarian do you want to be? How much of a thug do you want to be? Especially when some of these characters are kind of dickholes.
Yeah. There's an encounter towards the end of the first episode where I tend to try to play characters nice, but this guy was pushing me, and so I maimed him in a lasting fashion because it had hit that point. Like, I was trying to stop a fight and he kept going, so I just went, to heck with you. And then that happened at the start of the first episode, and I had to deal with that every time that character turned up for the next 4 episodes, and I felt so bad about it because he never brought it up. But I could tell that it was there as an issue, and it was just the most awful thing.
Yeah,
and it was
just like The Walking Dead, it has those things saying
They
this
remember.
character will remember what you've done.
Yeah.
So even if it isn't a huge deal, even if it doesn't make a gigantic branch in the story, and most of them don't, they're quite subtle things, you know that
Yeah.
they remember, and you know they're treating you slightly differently because of whether you helped them out. Maybe you gave somebody money. Maybe you told somebody that they should, follow the law, even if it was actually quite hard for them to do. And they don't like you as much.
Yep.
And so you have to do quite a hard job as the sheriff.
Yeah, it's like mechanically, there's not that much going on in the game. You tend to not have direct control over your character all that often, but the points where you are given the wheel, you have to have, you're making a very important decision, and so it's very satisfying and quite tense when you know that things can go either way, and generally you always feel like you are trying to pick the least rubbish option out of a handful of terrible options, and you know that there's no way for things to possibly get any better. You're just mitigating how rubbish things get, and I thought that that's so noir.
Yeah, it is very noir.
Yeah,
So the rest of the time, when you're in control, you are investigating crime scenes and looking at stuff. It does a really good job, I think, of directing that.
yeah,
Because whenever you're at a scene where you can interact with stuff, it's like an interactive movie. It shows you everything you can touch or fiddle with in a screen. It's got a circle around it, and you know whether you can look at this thing or pick it up, whether you can listen at this door or knock on it or kick it down.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of making those decisions one by one until you're done, and then it'll move you on to the next scene. But the way it guides you through that is really good. Like, there's a crime scene you're investigating, someone's been murdered, and you can look at all of the stuff that's lying around, and once you've looked at everything, the camera angle just shifts, and then you see there's another thing, there's like something sticking out from underneath the bed, and it's like the final clue. So you always get like the final clue at the end of the scene, so the big dramatic reveal always happens last. Whereas if it was more like
yeah.
a regular old-fashioned adventure game,
Yeah.
you just sort of bumble around and encounter
Looking
things
at
at random,
everything.
so you don't get those
Or
sort
have
of
that
dramatic
the
builds.
music that, like in L.A. Noire, where the music kind of fades out once you've seen everything there is to see, and you're like, oh, okay, I don't feel like I got enough, but, that's fine,
Yeah.
I'll move on.
Yeah, it's not like the last thing you found was like just a cigarette.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that always
Relevant.
used to annoy me.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an empty water bottle. Oh, well, great. What do I do with that? Who cares?
It's much more directed, and you've got less freedom, but that actually results in a much stronger story. The beats happen in the kind of order they would in a film noir movie, and I was happy to give up that freedom
Yeah.
for the fact that it made a better story, and one where I wasn't constantly getting stuck. Like, at no point in this did I feel like I'd hit a wall and I didn't know what to do next. It just rolls you along from scene to scene, and occasionally says, which one of these 2 or 3 things do you want to do next? But it never leaves you in the dark.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the really successful things that this game does, is that while it takes that freedom away from you, you never feel like you're being stifled by the story that it wants to tell. It makes you the one who makes the significant decisions for your character. You never suddenly go to a cutscene and Bigby Wolf is doing something that you would never do. Every time that character influences the narrative, that's your decision, which is so successful and so important. And you see examples where that has made a lot of other compelling games just completely fall apart. Like Mass Effect was always doing that. You would be having complete control over this whole story until there was a cutscene and they wanted your guy to fail in a specific fashion.
Yeah.
And I would never have done that. I'm a much better shot than him. Stuff like that, where characters die in a cutscene because suddenly it decides it's not a shooting game anymore. But with this, any time that you have to influence the story, you get to do it, and I think that's great.
Even in The Walking Dead, there was a part in the second episode where you had to fail a QuickTime event. You're hammering away at the button and there's no way for you to actually succeed. It's just waiting for you to fail. And The Wolf Among Us never does that. They've learned that kind of stuff is just annoying.
That kind of stuff pisses people off because I was so invested in that, and I was like, oh my god, what is wrong with my thumbs that I'm I'm not winning this scene.
I spent like 2 minutes just wearing my finger out, tapping Q over and over again.
I know. Annoying.
There were a lot of QuickTime events in this. Generally, they were pretty good, but I think there are a couple of fight scenes, things like that, where the feedback that you get isn't great. Sometimes you it looks like you've succeeded, but your character kind of failed anyway. They still got hit by whatever they're fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether it's just that they're secretly not caring about my input,
Yeah.
which is probably the case,
Yeah.
or if you actually can fail it even worse than in that scenario. And I think that that's something I hope that they work on, because if I'm going to have to deal with a quick time event, I want to know that there should be proper feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a disappointing mar on the experience, because I actually did quite enjoy the way that they made you get involved in those action sequences, and usually QuickTime events are just poison for me.
Yeah, I think these are the best QuickTime events that you're likely to see, the most easily excusable.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to Zed Games. You just heard Jared Emerson Johnson with the theme tune from The Wolf Among Us, which is the game we have been talking about, because we really liked it.
We did.
And we liked the music, didn't we? It's very 80s synthy, but not in a Hotline Miami kind of way. It is very suited to the kind of noir detective story it's telling, even though it is in the 80s rather than, the 40s.
It's moody and evocative, and the whole opening sequence that you see that plays over, I really enjoyed. Was a lot of use of silhouette and some bold neon colors, and just your main character Bigby walking brutally through the city, smoking a cigarette.
Oh, love it.
Yeah,
He smokes so many cigarettes.
so many. I wish there should be a count for how many times that you smoked a cigarette throughout the game. I think that would be great.
Anytime it gave me an option in the dialogue to not say anything and just light a cigarette, I did.
Oh, that's an option as well.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I love this game.
Yeah. I extinguished a cigarette at least once because I was nice.
No, I saw a sign
Yeah.
in somebody's shop that was like no smoking and immediately lit a cigarette.
You're a jerk.
Yeah.
She remembered that.
That sign remembers
That
me.
sign. The store owner remembers you. Tell me more about the art style, because I wanted to hear more about, obviously, the music, but then the art style as well. Like, you keep using the word noir, and in my head I'm still kind of picturing the same art style as The Walking Dead, but 80s, I think. But want to know, have they incorporated, like, those really old 50s noir films, the black and white? Is it all of that cool shadowing and shading, and is that brought into this, or not so much?
They use a lot of heavy blacks. It has that same cel-shaded look that The Walking Dead had, although I think this is far more successfully pulled off. But because it is trying to also evoke that mythical 80s rather than the actual one, they do have a lot of pinks. Everything is very, very pink and purple, and there's a neon edge to everything. It's a startlingly attractive game, I think, and it's something that, because of the art style that they've chosen, it's going to always look good. So it's very, very comic booky, although, again, like, the comic book had a series of artists on it. Not all of them were great. This game looks better than the book, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Going back and rereading some of the early issues of the comic book, I was annoyed that Bigby didn't look as good in the comic book as he does in the game.
Yeah, he looks awesome. He really does have his model is fantastic and very expressive. The voice work is fantastic as well. Like it's very, very strong in its characterization, and it does a great job of just drawing you right into it. So all of the aesthetics are top notch, particularly considering that it is a downloadable title as well, and one where their budget has to be really quite directed, and all of their assets have to be sort of densely clustered.
Yeah, there are things that you notice, like background characters you'll see reused and things like that. And I think it's always the same guy who picks you up in a taxi. Not necessarily because he's the same character, but just because they only drew one taxi driver. you can see where they've saved money so they can focus it on making the main characters and the central parts of the game look and sound great.
Yeah.
They've reused locations. You do go back to the same places a lot. But I didn't mind at all.
No, actually, that's one of the things that the previous Telltale games, before they made it really big with The Walking Dead, they had a Monkey Island series and one based on the Homestar Runner cartoons and Sam and Max, and those reused assets in a way that tended to be annoying and made it feel obviously cheap. But here it suits the story because it is such a interwoven narrative, and you do have to return to crime scenes and approach characters again when you realize that they're more involved in this conspiracy than you expected. I think it is worth drawing attention to just how well they've modelled all of the characters, though. They, in a thing where you have to be interviewing people and where you are either going to be an aggressive jerk or where you want to sympathise with them, they've done an amazing job of making them very sympathetic characters. You at times you have to interrogate Mr. Toad's child because he's seen some stuff, and I could not imagine anyone trying to do that as a big tough guy, because it's just so, like, you feel so sensitive to how fragile this kid is. You know, their voice is breaking. They're a big. They're like a 3 foot. No, they're a 3 foot frog wearing a t-shirt, but they're just so emotive. They've just got these big sad eyes. They're just like, how could you could have to be a royal bastard to not feel anything when this kid starts to cry.
I'm picturing some of the other... correct me if I'm wrong, but in my head, I'm imagining some of the other characters to almost look more like maybe the original Grimm fairy tales and things like that. You know, given that there's this underlying theme of the murder and the detectives, and they're kind of a little bit more scary. You know, like the original actual fables and fairy tales and things are not really very pleasant stories that most don't have happy endings. And the artwork and those kind of Hans Christian Andersen style drawings and things as well, I'd like, there's something very sad and a little depressing about looking at those images sometimes as well. Are they leaning more towards that?
Yeah, like that's one of the themes of the Fables book, is just that the stories that we have now, the Disney versions, are significantly bastardized, and that the original Fables were much, much, darker. That they are all stories that basically warn you about, don't have sex or monsters will do terrible things to you. Like that's pretty much the moral of every fairy tale, right? Like, dwarves are going to do awful things to you. Don't do anything at all.
Until Disney came along, and then suddenly dwarves were happy little people that you lived with, and apples were not good. It's all a bit backwards.
And so it does dig that up, and it kind of talks around it, but there's little tiny things like you encounter the Little Mermaid.
What?
Mm-hmm. And like the Little
I want to know more about this.
The Little Mermaid in the original Hans Christian Andersen story, even that is
a very brutal death. I know. That's a sad, sad story.
But there's that whole thing about the fact that it hurts her every time she takes a step.
It feels like, listeners, if you're not familiar with the story, I'm going to say I am. It is one of my favourite films and stories, and everything Little Mermaid is amazing. But the story is that, like, whenever she takes a step, it feels like she's walking on 1,000 knives, and it's all very painful.
Yeah.
But that was her trade-off with, the witch, that whole thing.
So, can I bring this up?
Yes, you can.
So when you encounter her, she's down on her luck, and she's a stripper.
Oh God, I'm so depressed already.
She's trying out in the strip club where the other fairy tale character who runs the place is berating her because she's not smiling.
Aww.
Because she's dancing on her feet, and every step does feel like she's walking on 1,000 knives. And that's the tone.
Yeah. It's quite a downbeat story.
Yeah.
That it's
well,
telling.
it wasn't a happy story to start with. So that's answered my question. That's good. Mm-hmm. That's interesting that they've followed that, and I'm more interested in playing it because of that, I think.
So to wrap it up, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the decisions you've made. Because like The Walking Dead, at the end of each episode, you get to see, you're reminded of what you've done, and it shows you what the internet did. You get a percentage, like you and 89% of people did this nice thing, and then maybe only you and 30% of people did this kind of jerkish thing.
Like lit up in a store that said no smoking.
Which just makes you feel even worse. But in this, I found, in the early episodes, I was in the majority quite a lot, and it wasn't until the end that I'd started to veer off and maybe made some unpopular decisions. Was I alone in that?
I found myself generally in the majority, which I was surprised by as well, because I was trying to be reserved and be nice considering the awful circumstances. Apart from that one jerk thing I did that haunted me for the rest of the game, and so playing through it, I assumed that most gamers, being that they are awful monsters, would continue to be awful monsters in the game, which is why morality systems like this exist, because it's actually a challenge for gamers to be nice and considerate and want to be generous. But then I was surprised that everyone else seemed to be generally making these same decisions, so there we go.
I always feel like these games are just a really good test of my ethical decisions and my morality in general. So I'm really
I've seen your
interested in-
Fables character.
Oh, I look back at The Walking Dead as well, and I think I was not in the high percentage very often. You were 19% of people. I was like, oh, man. I thought everybody cut off his leg. Oh, I'm kidding. Lee Jody, that was awesome. Thank you. I'm going to go and play it. Where can people get it?
You can get it from basically everywhere. Like the other Telltale games, this is available on tablet and on mobile and on PC and on console. You can get it from Steam. You can download it from the App Store. It's basically everywhere.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a retail release as well available next month. It will be on a disc if you are the kind of person who buys games on discs in stores. So,
You might do.
yes, do so. It is wonderful, and it will reveal things about you, Candy.
Oh, what? It probably will. Let's not beat around
Things
the bush.
that we're not going to be surprised by now, though.
I'm going to keep a score of my
Yeah, I want to know.
choices, and I'll share them.
Yeah.
Good.
I
Yeah.
assume the final scene for your playthrough will just be the entire town burning
Yeah,
behind
you and 2% made this decision.
and you'll just be
Jerks.
drenched in blood, gnawing on a skull like it's an apple.
Aw, I might try really hard to be nice. Probably not.
All right, let's hear something upbeat and cheerful now. This is from the WarioWare Smooth Move soundtrack. It's Tomorrow Hill. Lee, you have been playing Divinity Original Sins, which is a co-op RPG, one you can play by yourself or with a pal.
Yeah, it's kind of a throwback game as well. It's an isometric RPG. It's a medieval fantasy kind of thing, and it's inspired by the RPGs that I played in my youth, being a young PC gamer. Things like the Ultima series, aspects of the Baldur's Gate games, games where you had just a lot of things you could do. The Ultima games were known for the fact that if you wanted, you could just go and bake a loaf of bread by gathering wheat and grinding it and blah, blah, blah. And this is one of those things where all of these systems are there available for you. But at the same time, it's a very modern RPG. It's using contemporary technology. And so you get to see these things simulated in a way that you don't get otherwise. So you play as a pair of characters who have arrived in town. You are source hunters. Source is basically bad magic.
It's not the kind of sauce you put on pasta.
No, it's not. It's SOURCE, source.
Haha.
Yeah.
See what you did there.
Yeah.
Good
Just had
joke,
to
man.
establish it
Yeah.
for the listeners. They don't know.
They
That's
don't
true.
know. And so you...
I play a game about sauce hunters.
Yeah.
Carry on, Lee.
Yes. we'll
I nearly got into a conversation about making pasta sauce last night. I'm sorry. Back to Lee.
that would have been very funny. So anyway,
Sorry, Lee.
yeah, so you're in town to solve a murder, in fact, and you initially are in this medieval town. There's a nobleman in town has been murdered. People seem to think that it was the wife and she was having an affair, and it turns out that things are much more complicated than that. But what's great about the game is that you're playing as two characters, and you can either play through single player, and one of them will have a personality of their own, And so as you're making dialogue choices, that will suddenly assert itself, and maybe you'll get into an argument with this other character that you've set up, and then they'll be using their conversational skills to try and convince you of which choice you make. So certain aspects will be out of your control there. But the best thing about this game, I think, in a series of great things, is that the whole thing has been designed to be played through co-op. So this is not something I've really encountered before. It was something that I really hoped that the Elder Scrolls Online would be, but it wasn't, which is one of those big games where you can leave a mark on the world, where you can just pick up everything and do stuff with it and bug people and get in trouble in one town and have to, sneak out of prison in another. But there's another person in there with you. So you are in this big reactive world with another human being, and they could be completely insane. Like in my case, I was playing with my girlfriend, and we played through... we've been playing through twice, because we played through the early access stuff from start to finish, and now we're playing through the proper retail game. And when we first started playing, her initial concern was that we would get into an argument in the game, and that would be bad. And I was like, no. What will happen is our characters might get into an argument over how to proceed. But that will be amazing. Like, that's the best thing. Not just having a fictional character get into a fight with me, but one where I have no idea what their deal is, because they're you. So the first time we played through, when she got into town, she immediately got into trouble for trying to steal a man's bucket. just because she wanted it. It was there. And I was like...
It's a game where you can pick up anything, right?
Yeah,
Basically,
yeah.
You can move everything. Table, I don't like you there. I'm moving you over here.
Yeah.
Bucket, I want you.
Yeah, so you can take everything, you can move it around, you can combine things, there's full crafting. But the other thing is that people own these things. So you can't just, take a man's bucket when he's right there, because he'll complain. And in this case, he started complaining and he chased her away, and then she tried to steal someone else's pillow. She was lying on their bed, and she was trying to open the chest at the foot of the bed while the guy was right there, and the guards came and put her in prison. And by the time I had run to where the prison was, either to, pay off her fee or bribe someone to help her out or sneak her out or something, she'd already made a deal with the prison devil and had sacrificed a portion of her soul for her freedom. So that was like the opening 10 minutes. She had thrown off my entire plan. And it was the best thing that has ever happened in any video game ever. She learned her lesson, and is now aware that you wait until someone leaves the room before you steal everything in it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, but it's great. It was kickstarted, and so the designers were able to. They were quite successful, and they had already mostly completed the game, so they were able to add all these extra things. So there's a trait you get very early on in the game, or that you can start with, and my girlfriend has it because she's playing a witch, and that is that you can talk to any animal. And because they've added the ability to talk to any animal, it means that every animal in the game, every incidental animal, has dialogue. Sometimes they'll have quests for you. Sometimes you've just got to do a quest for a pig that demands freedom.
So weird.
We went into the local inn, and this is in the middle of a story that is mostly about you solving a murder that leads to the discovery that there's a cult raising the dead because their evil god is possibly coming back. So the town is being attacked on all sides by the undead, and there are orcs landing on the beaches also trying to attack you. But we took time out because the cat in the inn asked us to help him romance the mayor's cat, because the mayor's cat was fancy and wouldn't accept him unless he could prove that he had a life of affluence. So we went through this whole process of working out who this cat used to be and finding his magnificent jeweled collar. And this involved talking to ghosts and fighting the largest crab I've ever seen. And at the end of it, our reward was that these two cats were able to get cat married.
This sounds amazing.
This sounds like some weird dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just picturing cats getting married.
So, like like the old Ultima games, or even like the Elder Scrolls,
Yeah.
you have a main quest that
Yes.
you can follow if you want to finish the storyline, but
Yeah.
there's just a million side quests you can do, and those are often better than the main storyline.
Yeah, I think that the main storyline is interesting, but it doesn't grab you in a way that the foibles of the rest of the town do. It's really good at padding out the world with little characters that just have enough personality to make you want to help them out. And there's a lot of different directions that the game can take you. So it's really, it's very successful at making you feel like you are part of a world that is just alive enough for the magic to hold. It's also like that's all really well and good. But the way that I'm describing it, it sounds quite twee. But it also has one of the most hardcore and awesome combat systems that I've encountered for a while as well. Every fight is really, really hard, but every fight is also quite clever. You have these spells. The magic system in the game relies on these four elements, and they all have a physical presence in the world, and they all bounce off one another. So one of the simplest ways to take someone out of a fight is to make it rain in the general area, which makes everyone wet. Water pools into puddles, and so if you've got like a lightning spell, you can blast that and everyone gets electrocuted and stunned.
Nice.
But you can also then cast a spell that ordinarily just makes people cold on someone who's wet, and suddenly they're encased in ice.
Oh, that's extreme.
If a fireball gets cast near them, that ice will melt and they'll be freed. All of the spells, all of the elements will react in a way that makes sense, and then in a way that you kind of get surprised at how much detail goes into it. So if you make someone bleed to the point where they're dripping with blood and there's a pool of it on the ground, like that's not just a graphic, that's now liquid that they're standing in, which reacts as all other liquids do. So it's really densely layered, and you can have a lot of fun with it. And we've been playing it so that the elemental powers are split between the characters that we're controlling, so we have to work as a team all the time to get stuff to happen. So it makes it fun because it's turn-based as well. You never feel like you can't do anything or that you're left out, because you are constantly setting up the next person's turn so that they do the cool thing or they're doing the thing for you. So it's a clever way of getting around that problem of having to wait until it's your turn in a fight.
So can you freeze a puddle of someone's blood so that they fall over
Gross.
on their own blood?
That's a good question.
Very cool.
Something to try next time.
I will, yeah, because you can freeze pools of water, definitely, and that becomes slippery, and then you fall over, and then you can't get up until, like, the next turn after that. Making people fall over is a great thing to do in this game. And it's always funny watching a skeleton trip. And every single time, this little, like, whoops appears. Like, whatever it was, if it was the
Does it
Lord
just become a
Golgoroth.
Pile of bones.
No, it just, like, falls over, and then it just goes, whoops. I laugh every time. Yeah.
Oh, it's the simple things.
Being a turn-based combat system in a game where you can have two people playing and wandering off and doing their own thing, you said your girlfriend wound up getting arrested. If one of you gets in a fight while the other one is somewhere else, what happens?
You have your turn-based thing. If they walk within the combat radius, then they enter the queue as well, but otherwise time just passes around them. So they don't have... There's no day-night cycle in this game, because that would just be... There's apparently one too many systems to integrate with the budget that they had. They have it in place so that they can integrate it in if there are expansions or if other people want to do that. So it does mean that time is kind of perpetual, so it doesn't break the game as much. You don't suddenly have other NPCs just going through their entire daily routine while you're having one fight with the guards nearby.
Right.
So the illusion is it holds, I guess. Yeah.
One other thing I have to ask about, what I love about these kind of role-playing games is the amount of character personalization there is. How much can I make a really hideous-looking character with a bunch of sliders and then give them all the best skills? And also have them talk to animals.
You have a handful of faces and hairstyles and portraits. Because it's isometric, you view a character from quite a distance. So you don't have the chance to go right in and make yourself obese and have 8 different types of scar on your face. But there are a great many other ways to change your appearance as well. You can all the armor sets have unique components. I think you can dye your outfits. You have a few different bits that are just ornamental. So I think that you should be fine.
But I can't be a fatty.
You can't be a fatty. No, you are you're a chunky dude.
All
yeah.
right. Well, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
All right. So that is Divinity: Original Sin. It's available on PC.
PC, Mac, and I believe coming to Linux. But it's not a console game. But look, it's fantastic. If you have another person to play through, if you have the time, this is the closest for me. This is the closest thing to that great tabletop RPG experience where other people, you get to talk about what you want to do with other people, and then they do the complete different thing and just throw you off entirely. Yes. It is profound. If you have ever played Skyrim or Oblivion and wished you could have your friends in there with you, this is going to give you that opportunity.
Right.
I love it.
Cool.
That's Divinity: Original Sin. We have been Zed Games. Thank you very much for listening. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at thatthing/ZedGamesAU and at our website, zgamesau.net. We're going to leave you with a song from the forthcoming game Hyperlight Drifter. This is by Baths, and it's called Hyperlight Drifter.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.